Welcome to Writers Pad, a new feature from the 521 community where we'll be delving into the background of some of the key players from the graffiti scene. To kick things off, I'd like to introduce an iconic writer from the early London scene, a writer whose work I've admired since I first saw that classic panel on Bad Meaning Good back in the 80s. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to the man like Coma.
All right, Kilo, thanks for
Good to have you.
asking me to do this, yeah.
So tell us a little bit about your history. Obviously, you're a writer from the first sort of generation of the London scene. I know bits and pieces, but tell me more. I want to know about how you got into it, you know, what influences you had, what were your inspirations?
Yeah, I guess I'm part of the first generation of train writers in London.
Yep.
So I started writing in, I'd say, 1985.
Okay.
And that was, I guess it was because it was hip hop. It was part of the hip hop culture that was coming over from New York at the time. So breaking was kind of the first thing that came over with,
Like a package.
with electro. So you'd see videos like Buffalo Gals, Wild Style, the film Wild Style, the book Subway Art, Style Wars. All these things were coming over from America, from New York, from about 83, 84.
Yep.
And graffiti was just part of that. And I went to New York in 1985.
Okay.
But I wasn't actually writing there, but I'd seen Subway Art. So I saw, say, like quick throw-ups and scene throw-ups in New York.
Did you go there like specifically for graffiti, or was it just a case
It
of...
was, well, I had family there.
Okay.
My aunt and uncle and cousin. So we kind of went on a holiday, me and my brother and my gran, and stayed with family.
Oh.
But because I was into hip-hop, I wasn't writing, but... So it was kind of almost like a pilgrimage to see it in action in the 80s in New York. So I saw like graph on trains, the tail end of it. So I'd say half the trains were still painted.
Was that the white elephant stage, or was it like...
There were some were white.
Okay.
And some were the silver, shiny silver ones.
Yeah. Was that with the blue ribbon? Those ones?
Yeah, the blue ribbon. Some were corrugated.
Okay.
But then you still had the white trains with the flat white trains that were graphed up.
Yeah.
So I saw a Doe's piece running, this cast and a New York cast.
Yeah. How was that? That must have been pretty mad. Like, to see another cast.
Well, this was before I knew cast. Before cast existed, I think.
Yeah.
So I saw it there, in reality. I guess I saw New York and in the 80s and saw hip hop happening. Like, I was just really into it. So I guess when I came back to London, I started writing. It was, I guess, breaking. I was all right at breaking, but graffiti really clicked with me because I was kind of artistic.
Had you come across graffiti already, or was it really...
Just through Subway Art?
Okay.
And then maybe, I guess, Covent Garden would have had Trailblazers stuff around that time, but I wasn't painting at that time.
Okay.
And I'm not sure if I actually went to Covent Garden around before I was a writer.
Yeah.
So Subway Art, I guess, like everyone, was the thing, the Bible, which got me and millions of others into it, and then going to New York and seeing it, and watching Wild Style and Style Wars, all of these things.
What was the sort of like the hip hop scene like in New York at that time?
Yeah, well, I went to the Fresh Festival.
Okay.
So Fresh Festival '85, which was in Queens, I think, or Stadium somewhere, and I saw LL Cool J was the first one on.
Wow.
So no one had heard of him. He opened. Then it was like Houdini, Fat Boys, and Run DMC headlined. So my aunt is like a white Jewish woman in New York, and she took us, and she was like the only white person there. it was an experience. But so all of these things, seeing the graph on trains, being kind of at these hip hop jams, living it, really I got the bug, the kind of
raw.
Yeah,
raw and intense.
And started writing here. I guess I must have seen the kind of early writers throw-ups, tags, early pieces
You
over
were
here.
sort of more Big Met sort of areas.
Yeah,
weren't
so I'm from Wembley. I
Right.
grew up in Wembley. So I used to go to college in Watford.
you? Okay.
So I'd ride the Big Met every morning, and I just didn't care about college. I dropped out. I just wasn't into college. So I'd started tagging the insides, and it'd park up at Watford. So I'd even tag the outsides of the
Yeah.
train. And that's how I kind of started myself into like the graph culture, I guess, of getting up.
Okay.
I'd see throw-ups by Hayes, who became Cast.
Yep.
Hayes and Sane.
Mad.
So HE and SE throw-ups on the Big Met, like from Harrow to Northwood Hills, going that way. They were like the first, I think, writers that I kind of came across on like track sides and
Big
trains
names as
and
well.
stuff. Yeah. So this was 85, and a mate of mine, Reem, he was getting into graph at around the same time. So we were kind of doing stuff together, and he took me to the yard, my first yard.
Were you affiliated to any crews, or was it?
Well,
I
me
know
and
the name,
Reem
but, you know.
used to just call ourselves Divine Lords,
Okay.
and I think my brother was in it as well.
Right.
But I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say what his tag is.
He will remain anonymous for now
Yeah.
until we get him in here. The scene was pretty intense back then, from what I know from my brief visits that I used to make to London, and so
There was a kind of a kind of growing hip hop scene, I guess, with Westwood
Yeah.
and people like that. He was doing. I remember one big jam was like Jubilee Gardens.
yeah, I was there.
That was the
85.
famous.
85.
That was one of the kind
That
of
was a mad jam.
early hip hop jams that I remember from that age,
Yeah.
from that era. So Westwood was kind of, I guess he was the main guy who was bringing people together for the music.
Because obviously I was out of London, but I remember Mike Allen was another one we
Yeah.
used to gravitate to. But Westwood was, definitely the man.
So Mike Allen's Capital Rap Show, he had a graffiti competition.
Okay.
And so me and my brother entered it. It was called New York to LA. It was something to do with designing New York to LA, a poster for the Electro Comp or
Yeah,
something.
there was an album, wasn't
Yeah.
there? I know that one.
And we came in like second or third.
Oh, wow.
So I thought, well, we must be quite good at this. So that was around 85 as well.
Okay. Can you remember like your first piece?
I didn't rack in
Yeah.
those days.
Right.
So there was like a car shop on the corner at the end of my road, and they sold second-hand used paints which still had paint in them, but they were cheaper than buying them new. So I bought, I don't know, a really mustard-coloured yellow and
Nice.
a brown Duplicolour or card plan or something like that.
Yeah, the
For
good
about
stuff.
two quid. And then went to the park, and then there was a bridge, and did a Rich piece.
Okay.
So
you
I
did your name?
Yeah, I did my name,
Most people would have done like
R-I-C-H.
rap or break
Yeah.
or pop or whatever.
So that was the first piece I did in the daytime.
Yeah, daytime as well.
Yeah, yeah.
Wicked.
But the first train was with Reem. He knew how to get into Wembley Park.
Okay.
This was about 85 as well. And it was so easy to get into. There were no fences, in those days, no cameras.
No lasers, no
Nothing.
Yeah.
It was just a big shed. You'd kind of be able to get in from the street, walk up a little bank, and you'd be on the lines and behind Wembley Park sheds.
Wow.
And there was a door that was always open that you could just get into from the back.
Sounds unbelievable.
Yeah,
doesn't
yeah.
it, when you think what we got to go through now.
So me, Reem, and a couple of mates were at a wedding, and we were all drunk and in suits, and his idea was like, oh, I know how to get into Wembley Park yards. Let's go and do the yard.
In suits?
Yeah, and so we went in suits.
What?
He had paint, we got paint, he changed, and then we ended up going to Wembley Park in our suits.
That's got to be like a first, like writers going into a yard wearing suits.
Yeah, yeah.
That's formal.
And that was the first piece I did in
That
like
is
really,
nuts.
really bad purple car paint.
Have you got pictures of that?
Nah.
Yeah,
nah.
that was the days when the cameras were a
Yeah.
little bit
That was the first yard experience.
wide in suits.
Yeah.
I mean, that is
Yeah.
that's worth it
After
alone,
a
isn't it?
wedding, yeah.
That's a story in itself. Wow.
Then I got the bug, I guess.
Right.
So
So this is 85.
once you've been
still.
85, yeah, it might have been early 86.
Yeah.
because once you've been in the yard, that's it. It's really addictive.
Yeah, it's the adrenaline, and
It's
not that I've ever been there, of course, disclaimer, but you know.
Through '86, I got to meet more and more other writers from Harrow. So people like Tilt,
Yep.
Cast, Nice
legends.
One, Sane, those guys, and we'd all go painting together.
Wicked.
So Harrow became like a writer's bench type thing.
Yeah.
So people would meet.
Because there was an actual bench that they refer to as the bench, wasn't there, around that sort of area?
I'm not. Well, we
I
just
think it was
meet.
Harrow on the Hill.
Yeah, we just meet outside McDonald's.
Okay.
Like Harrow McDonald's, you'd go out. Any evening, you'd go on your. You just turn up on your own and you'd meet writers.
Yeah.
People there, so we'd just go. We didn't have mobile phones in those days.
No.
You just rock up. You just go there.
That's it.
Yeah.
It was like
no one could have arranged anything.
no. It's all word of mouth, wasn't it?
Yeah.
That's the thing. I mean, nowadays, obviously, the new school, it's like you've got your Instagram and your whatever, WhatsApp, so everything could be so much more coordinated. But back then, people don't realise what we went through.
Yeah.
Man.
It was so spontaneous in a way. You wouldn't plan to go to yards. We'd just end up like, oh, right, we're racking in the daytime.
Yeah.
And then have some paint on us and then, oh, let's just do some track size or whatever. Or, yeah.
I mean, speaking as myself, I was outside, but I used to come up to London like every month or whatever, and I'd always go to Grove because that was like a pilgrimage for me.
Yeah.
But like obviously back then it was not, let's say, the most pleasant of areas for a writer to go to, especially an out of London writer. So are you aware? I mean, you know, were you aware of what was happening? I guess, no doubt.
Kind of.
In terms of like the Hall of Fame and places like that, the Pit or whatnot.
Well, I was definitely aware of the graph going on under the Westway.
Yeah.
It was quite famous. And then there was the Futura piece, which was probably one of the first pieces.
Yeah, a lot
wasn't
of people, like, I've spoke to Scam about that, and that piece seems to be the piece that most people credit as like the first to go up in the UK, as far as I'm aware. I know there's a bit of Bristol as well. There's things happening over there, but
Because I spoke to Mick Jones from The Clash.
Oh, wow.
And he was telling me about how they brought Futura over.
that's right. Yeah, I heard
Because
that.
he was basically saying that Futura was on tour with them, and when they were doing gigs, Futura would be painting
Wicked.
on stage, and they'd all be choked up by all the paint fumes and stuff like that.
That's
So
nuts.
they must have brought him over
Yeah.
that's when he did the piece, I guess.
Yeah. That's the infamous one. There was I think Scam had like a little Ling thing above the top of it. There's pictures of it like, floating around. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
So,
But obviously, also in addition, like what I'm trying to get at is the taxing and the sting. You know, that there was things happening.
well,
back then a lot of people don't know
I guess
about.
we'll get to that.
Yeah.
But I had family in Bayswater, which is kind of near Grove, near Notting Hill, and so I'd be going over in the weekends, staying with family every weekend, every other weekend, and so when I got into Graff, I'd just wander down to Grove under the Westway and check it all out, either on my own or maybe with my brother, and then again started to kind of meet writers. I remember seeing Rio, I think he was Judge then, doing some painting on like one of the pillars or something, and him being quite arrogant and going,
there
who
was
the
a lot
fuck
of
are
that
you?
back then.
Who the fuck are you? Why are you here? Kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's almost like you had to earn your respect
Totally.
with writers.
Which again is like something that in the current, in the present scene, it doesn't work like that these days. You know?
Really, yeah. Because that's what I'm more interested in, the subculture, like the traditions, the history, and like the hierarchy,
Definitely,
and the values, and like what writers had to go through to kind of earn their way up.
That's one of the reasons that we wanted to try and introduce this sort of phase of the 521 thing, is just to give writers a chance to kind of like tell their tales and let people know, because it's such a different scene back then to what it is now.
I can imagine,
Totally.
And you can't really blame anyone because it's just technology as well, and culture. I mean, we had it easy in a way that there was no cameras and the security to do yards, but in other ways more difficult kind of thing.
The whole communication things, like like we were saying, you had to plan things rather than just kind of
So I'd go down to Grove, and gradually kind of built up some got some respect from other Grove writers and started hanging out with Hate, Foam, Casby, Scam, Demo. So those were the main kind of Grove writers that I hung out with. I don't know. I kind of became like part-time Grove there,
Well,
and then part-time Harrow.
This is the thing, you know, like I know bits and pieces about you and your history, and like I always associated you with those names just purely and simply because most times that's where, you know, I'd see like a Casby piece. I remember there was a pillar, one of the pillars, and you had a piece, Foam had a piece, and Kaz had a piece.
Yeah.
There was one other one as well. I can't remember the other one, or maybe it was done after.
Well, that was done straight after New Cross Yard.
Oh, really?
So we still had paint with us. Zachy D was painting under the Westway.
Was that when he did the eyes or the explosion? He did
something, and he had some paint left over. He said, "Do you want to use the paint?" So we just hadn't. We'd been up all night doing New Cross, and then ended up under the Westway and thought. And then Casby pulled out this mad wild style thing out of his head, and I just did a straight letter or whatever.
No, but that pillar, you know, like what I like about that piece is it's like got all of those West London styles sort of encapsulated on one like surface, because you got yours like you're saying was quite simple, but it's funky, you know, and then the foam one, exactly, which was pretty wild from what I remember. Yeah, but
So half the time I'd be hanging out with the Harrow writers on the Big Met,
right?
So doing Rickmansworth, Wembley Park, those kind of yards. And then the other half the time, this was probably maybe a year later, I would just be hanging out with the Grove lot. Right. So I did Gloucester's a couple of times, New Cross, those things. So a bit of both. I mean, I guess Grove was in a city, and then Wembley was just a bit further out.
When you did Gloucester's, did you have to get Foam's permission to do that?
Well, Foam, because he was a bit younger, it was almost like we just took the piss out of him.
This is what Scam said when I speak.
Foam was just like someone we not bullied, but he was just like, "Oh, shut up, Foam! You're just a little toy."
But that's what I'm saying. The amount of people I know from the old West London times, but you know, for like myself, if anyone doesn't know, Foam was like, he was the guy you did not want to go anywhere near. You know, you did not want to meet him.
And maybe because that dynamic, we were older and he was just still a bit younger, and so he kind of had more respect. He had some respect for us. But that was that at that time. Okay. So Foam I never ever had a problem with him ever. But a year or two later, things got a bit darker and things started to happen. I know Foam caused a lot of problems. Yeah,
he's got a bit of a history, but the thing is, you can't take away, you know, he's a dope writer. He's amazing.
Yeah, and who knows? I don't know what he's up to now.
No, last I heard he was running a barber shop, but I don't know.
Yeah, me and Hate went to try and find him once, and we found the kind of space, the office space he was renting out. And it had like handwritten signs, haircut on the wall, eyebrows, £2 or something like that.
But it's a nice hand style as well.
But we never saw him.
Obviously, you were involved in the scene for quite a brief period in terms of like, what year was it that you exited?
I stopped in 1988.
Was there a reason for that, or was it just a case of
there's a whole load of
like
things?
An arrest or something?
So
like that?
You know, me and Tilt were the first to be sent to prison for graff.
I heard this,
Well, for trains anyway.
Yeah.
So we got 2 months detention centre in 1986.
Wow. What age were you then, if you don't mind?
18. So it was like the short, sharp shock, like the army type thing. And when we came out, that's when I really started to go wild with Coma.
Yeah.
So it didn't have any deterrent effect.
There you go. Yeah.
It just made me worse. But so that's when more of my graff was done after that.
Okay.
And so from 87, 88, I was just going mad with Coma stuff. And on one of these missions that we were doing, there was a photographer there saying he was doing a book or something. Okay. And he was taking photos of us, all the Harrow writers. Right. He put the photos in to a chemist. The chemist saw all this people doing graff, called the police. It was almost like we were a graffiti gang. And they arrested all of us, like raided the house, the whole lot, and did me for Coma for everything I'd done.
Yeah.
So it was like hundreds of thousands of pounds worth of damage. We all had to go to Acton Crown Court. And the case just went on for about a year. I was on bail for about a year.
That's nuts.
And this was in '88. And I kind of, during all that, I'd stopped graph. And I'd kind of grown out of the buzz. And the acid house scene had come along.
Yeah, the music had a big, like,
and it was almost like that was one scene where I was getting a buzz and excitement of, and then I started going out. And once you've taken ecstasy and gone raving and listened to other kind of music, it was almost like I left that behind.
Your style's going to be a bit abstract if you try and paint, isn't it?
Yeah, and I wasn't interested in graph anymore. I was interested in getting off my head and listening to music and raving. And so I'd stopped in about '88, but the court case the actual sentencing didn't come up until '89.
Okay.
So I got sent down again for 6 months, and I'd stopped anyway.
It's just mad,
so it was
isn't it?
Complete waste of time, waste of money, everything. In 1988, things started getting a bit dark with the graph.
Yeah, totally.
So it started off like this innocent, kind of really creative scene and fun. And I think in the late '87, '88, there was a lot of robberies going on in Grove
There was
under the Westway
thing, wasn't there? There was all
and
those
steaming
reports of that.
And I was with a group of people who were robbing another couple of young kids for their Public Enemy tickets. But I got arrested for that.
Yeah.
Because someone who was there said Coma, and so the police
Because
knew
that was
I was
before
Coma.
the joint enterprise stuff, wasn't it? So
I
did
think
they
so.
think you'd literally done it? They must have, like...
So just being there and being the evidence being that I was
enough.
they knew I was Coma, and someone had mentioned Coma in
Okay.
that whole situation. Me and Haight got arrested for it. There were we were just there.
Yeah.
There were plenty of others who were more involved in it, who
no
didn't
doubt.
get arrested.
Was fun there?
Yeah. Well, yeah. And we had to go on an ID parade. And so I didn't get picked out. I just went dressed all differently, had my hair all differently, and didn't get picked out. Haight got picked out, and he ended up on remand in Feltham.
Right.
So all of this stuff happening was, again, probably another reason for just giving up on the whole
leave a
thing.
bad taste, isn't it?
Yeah.
Let's be honest.
Yeah. So luckily, that I would have ended up getting a big prison sentence if I'd got a sentence for robbery. So luckily, I kind of got away with that, got into Acid House, and that's how I kind of stopped, really.
Within the scene nowadays, there seems to be this kind of trend at the moment when if a writer has stopped using their name, let's say, for example, retired or whatnot, it seems like it's kind of open season for anyone to take that name and run with it. I mean, I know for a fact that there's another Coma, for example.
Yeah.
Like, what are your sort of thoughts on that?
Well, I found someone was saying to me about, I don't know, 10 years ago that there's another Coma who's getting up a lot. And I just thought, well, because I'd kind of left the scene behind so long ago and I wasn't really following graph, I'd stopped even being involved. I thought, well, whatever. I wasn't that bothered, but at the same time, I thought, well, at least he should have written Coma too.
Yeah.
Just to,
like the old rules, kind of.
yeah, it's almost
unwritten
like
rules.
a bit of as respect for the history and for people who've gone before.
Yeah.
It's all part of being a writer.
Yeah.
The history of who's been before, like the traditions of your name, that kind of stuff.
It's like, because when I saw the new Coma, I naturally assumed, without knowing you so well, that you'd handed that name on to that person to keep your sort of legacy alive in another entity, if you like. But obviously that's not the case.
No, I mean, I don't even know who it is. And I've seen his Instagram, but I think he only does a few things out of London somewhere.
Yeah.
The people that matter know who
Exactly.
about me.
Music, that's something that you're really big on, so...
Yeah, well, from about '88, getting into the Acid House stuff and coming out of prison, it was only 6 months, so you only do 3 months. But coming out of there, I got a job straight away, so I could afford to buy records.
Right.
This was 1989, and so just being into music, getting into records and DJing, I kind of gravitated more towards music as a creative thing to do.
Yeah.
when before it was graph.
So it's like a natural progression, I suppose,
Yeah,
in terms of
and
like, the time.
well, most graph writers are kind of carry into hip hop, aren't they?
Yeah.
I stopped listening to hip hop after Public Enemy, so I know of the big '90s things, the famous Pete Rock and people like that, but I don't know much about hip hop after that.
We touched on it earlier, you know, the whole rave scene, 88, 89, that was coming in. And I know I've got friends as well that were die-hard hip-hop fans, but then they kind of like, they gravitated more. I think it's because of the girls. Like, you go to hip-hop jams and it's just like men, wall-to-wall men, isn't it?
Yeah. And the drugs, but a lot of those hip-hop guys went on to do kind of drum and jungle as well, or breakbeat, using hip-hop breaks, but a bit sped up. Around 89, 90.
Yep.
So I got into DJing like that, and then into the music kind of hardcore. I'd go back to New York a couple of times just to get records.
Yeah.
And then just to meet the New York DJs, go to the record shop, do the knowledge. So it was that obsession that kind of writing gives you, of like that
passion,
obsessive,
that drive.
like I just swapped that kind of move into music. Graph gives you this independence. It's like this autonomy and independence where you can go out and do whatever you put your mind to.
Your own destiny sort of thing.
Yeah, and it's like by any means necessary. Right, I'm going to go and paint that train, and I'll be able to do it somehow, where most people would never even try it.
Yeah.
So that attitude of that kind of fierce independence and kind of thinking that it's almost like you're a Superman type thing.
Yeah, no, I get it.
Yeah.
The music for you now, is that your main area of focus?
What I do now, like I do studying and academic research around crime and culture and youth crime and that, it ties into graph.
Going to prison, I mean, that must have been a whole nother level of experience.
The detention centre was like the army the first time, so that was in '86, me and Till. Luckily we were together, so we were taken from Harrow Magistrates Court in a van, and I think just that's the worst part, going there, and like you're in the van and you're seeing places we used to hang out, maybe people you know in the street, and you're locked up, think on the way to prison.
How long till I see these people
again? But and then when we got there, they were almost like army. You have to run everywhere. You have
like
to
a boot camp.
Yes sir, no sir.
Wow.
The next day they took you individually into the office, and they'd kind of try and break you. The prison governor would try and break you. He'd kind of try and humiliate you, shout you down, like call you all the most names under the sun. It was like the army. He gave you this discipline and made you more angry and resentful towards society.
Yeah.
But then the second time round, there were a nice one till there were a few others. I can't remember. Huz, maybe. Okay. And we all got, the ones that got sent down, we all got sent to Brixton for a week. And then from there to Feltham for a week. And then they allocate you where to go. And so I was sent off to Huntercombe, which is in Oxford, on my own. So I wasn't with anyone else.
Like, has that ever become an obstacle for you in terms of your,
No, well, it didn't.
Projects?
It wasn't for music.
Right.
Kind of.
Yeah,
it's almost like I got into music because it wasn't a proper job.
Yeah.
And so the criminal record didn't like mean anything.
Yeah.
But officially, it's supposed to be wiped after 7 years.
Yeah. See, this is what I've been told, but it's like it's always there in the background somewhere.
Because I got a DBS.
Yeah, same. Yeah.
I don't know. A few years ago, I was thinking of teaching, so I got DBS, and it's all on there.
It's
every
there, isn't it? Yeah.
every offence
That's
I've
what I
ever
mean,
done.
yeah.
So I've never had to go for a job where it matters,
right.
where they take that into account.
Yeah.
But what I'm doing, so kind of alongside music, I went back to uni to study.
Okay.
So I did a degree in criminology.
All right.
And because of my experience getting sent down, the graph stuff, being involved in all that stuff, it was almost like, I can use that to an advantage. I've got something that most people studying haven't got,
totally.
From the inside kind of thing.
That's like that certificate that they're never going to have,
Yeah, lived experience.
Yeah, totally.
So I did my degree in criminology, did well on that, and then did the masters at London School of Economics, which is a really good place for social sciences and stuff.
Right.
And then I got offered work in a research institute, which is connected to Birkbeck University.
Okay.
So it's researching crime. So I worked with a lot in the department which works with police.
Wow.
So I was getting arrested in the 80s.
That's
I was
just
getting
don't make
done by the
sense.
police.
Yeah.
And then 30 years later, I'm sitting at a table with all these like top policemen, and I'm kind of working with them, doing research
That must just blow your mind.
about fraud. It was about fraud, but I was like, what a mad kind of journey.
And the thing is, like, if it wasn't for the fact of your graffiti,
Exactly.
that might have never happened.
Yeah, if it wasn't for graffiti, I wouldn't have chosen criminology or my life experiences.
Wow.
And ended up there. And it's almost like I had so much hatred for the police back in the 80s. They were a lot more racist then and a lot more corrupt.
Yeah, definitely.
And then now it was almost like I'm with some of these top superintendents, fraud squad, financial crime in City of London, stuff like that. And they were all really cool, like really nice and really genuine and really into their job, doing it for the right reasons.
Yeah.
And it gave me a different kind of outlook, thinking, wow.
Well, it's like I was saying earlier, you know, we've all grown up. We're all like supposedly mature men now. So it's kind of like, I say that because some of us ain't, you know.
But when you're younger and you've got a lot more kind of resentment and anger and rebellion in you, towards authority and stuff like that.
Do you ever sort of look at what's happening in the graffiti scene like nowadays?
I only follow the writers from the old days
Yeah.
to see what they're up to now, or to see their old stuff.
Do you keep in touch with any of those old guys?
Hate is like a good friend.
Yep.
Caspi I see now and again.
Yep.
And then maybe a couple of my brother's mates I might bump into now and again.
Yep.
Scam now and again.
Yeah, he's always somewhere, isn't he?
Yeah. But what I do is kind of academic research. So the next thing I want to do is a PhD, which will be like a proper 4 or 5 year thesis, trying to research some writers. But it would be more about their experiences of sentencing from, say, my era to now, how sentencing has got much harsher, I think, for trains.
Yeah, definitely.
And then their experiences of why they're getting such high prison sentences. So trying to map the last 20, 30 years of the criminal justice attitudes and responses to the writers. Well, at the same time, it seems like the public are being a bit more tolerant with Banksy and all that stuff.
Like this morning, whenever we do these things, I try and like program it in so I can go and paint at one of the spots there are down here. And like the amount of people, like literally this morning, Score had painted a fresh piece yesterday, I think, and there was like people jogging, stopping, and doing selfies in front of this piece. Like 3 or 4 of them. You know, and then they're saying, "Oh, lovely work," and it's just we never had that back in the day.
No, everyone hated us.
Yeah.
We
were
was
like
hated.
the scum of the earth.
Yeah, we were scum of the earth. Even like the media,
the
public, everyone.
Yeah.
And I think that still exists to the bombers.
Your grandmother, for example, could get a can of paint and like a stencil maybe, let's say, or just her name. She could go out tonight, write her name. What's the difference between that and you or I writing Kilo or Coma on a wall? You know, it's just a different style maybe, but it's the same act.
Yeah,
you know?
same act, yeah.
So it's kind of like, it's just saying that anyone can do that aspect of it, but not everyone progresses onto the pieces and the productions and all the rest of it, you know.
You have to have the illegal stuff.
Exactly.
And that's part of the buzz.
It's cutting your teeth, isn't it?
It's almost like that buzz you're getting from committing crime, from breaking into a yard, from climbing all these fences. It's kind of, a lot of men, young men at that age, like teens, early 20s, want to do that risk-taking behaviour, don't they?
Totally.
Whatever, riding trains.
Yeah. I mean, that starts from like 15 probably as well.
Yeah.
When you look into
So it's kind of like a natural part of young men growing up.
Yeah.
That's just channeled into graph. That's just one form of it.
But nowadays, obviously, with technology, you can literally start doing burners tomorrow. There might be a lot of biting involved, but do you know what I mean? It's like you can bypass that whole aspect
development.
Of it. Which is a bit weird for me. I struggle with that a bit, you know.
Of course,
'Cause
it just seems fake.
Yeah,
it doesn't seem genuine, and it doesn't seem like it means as much.
Yeah. But like
Yeah.
now you've got so many like legit spots around various cities. It's like you can go straight to a legal environment if you like, so you don't have to put yourself into the illegal environment. But there's a part of me that still thinks that an up and coming writer should at least have a little dabble.
Definitely.
With that. I'm not condoning, illegal acts here. Well, maybe I am, but but at least progress with it. But there is a certain kind of dynamic who just stay at that level because it's that whole
right.
anti-establishment thing. It's like getting back at authority.
I know there are crews that are just hardcore
Focus on
bombers,
bombing.
aren't they?
Yeah, totally.
And like more than bombing probably.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, well, that's for a whole nother whole nother thing.
But then I know that there is something called Instagraph, who are just people who learn just on Instagram, and they'll just do a piece on a legal wall, and just to get the likes.
Do you know what as well though?
So that isn't real graph to me though.
Yeah, because also the style development, that's something us as older writers, it's kind of like you've got to develop your style, but now it's almost like it's kind of like prefabricated. You can just see who's hot on Instagram and just turn their stuff around, bend it a bit or whatever, and create a style which completely bypasses the way we did it.
Development.
Yeah.
So I never even got as good as being able to do wild style.
Yeah.
I just about got to do nice semi-wild style piece on the train and gave up. It was like that was it. The journey to get that far was the most important thing, rather than the actual being good.
One of the things that they really instilled into me was the functionality of lettering and the connections.
The flow.
Yeah, everything. But everything's got to have a reason for being there. It's like you don't just bung like a couple of arrows in that have you can't trace them back to
that's it.
But you don't see, there are writers that still use that, but it seems to me that a lot of people are missing it, But your generation, our generation, that was paramount.
You can definitely tell like a New York OG piece from everything else, the funk as you call it.
Exactly.
It's like there's definite flow and style that it's got this energy and a movement.
Yeah, vibrancy.
It could be a straight letter or a wild style, but there's just something about it that you don't get.
You mentioned on your way to the studio that you actually rode a train that was painted, but you also mentioned something else, which I kind of share that same view.
Yeah, I think
No, he didn't do it. Just disclaimer number 2, he did not do that.
I haven't painted a train since '88, and I've been arrested for it all, so I'm allowed to talk about it. Yeah. So on the train here, one of the carriages had graph on the outside.
Right.
So first of all, just to see trains running with graph I like that, but seeing the graph, and then most of the pieces that I've seen recently on trains, the style is really bad. And I'm not sure whether they're trying to, because someone was saying to me that people are trying to copy the Europeans, but there's no style there. Because one of the elements of the subculture is style. Yeah. It's like style wars.
Have you ever heard the term anti-style?
No, is that some kind of hipster thing?
You said it. Basically, I look at anti-style as an excuse.
It's just a cop-out, isn't it? It's a cop-out. But there are the odd writers like Rain Man, who used to be up a lot, and he's got interesting unique, kind of comic style, but it's not really graph style.
Reminds me of Rhubarb and Custard.
Yeah,
the old,
and you can tell he's really talented. He's got an art, but he's not graph, but he's still a writer.
Yeah, there's exceptions.
There's exceptions.
I know exactly, and I think like you were saying, that carriage you rode on, I think that comes back to what we were saying about the development of style, because I think people are just taking shortcuts and just like emulating what they're seeing on whatever social media, or even live. They might have seen a train live and try to copy it or whatever. I don't know.
But you'd think anyone with a genuine interest in it would just try and learn up a bit.
Yeah.
Or you just have to look at subway art.
Yeah.
And know these are the basics. This is what the blueprint.
Exactly.
Kind of thing.
Well, I've pitched it to certain newer writers, shall we say?
Yeah.
And I've been roasted for it, for like denouncing graffiti on trains.
Really?
Some not. Yeah. Like you don't do any trains. Well, anyway, but regardless of that, it's like the whole thing about graph is style and
Yeah,
a development, evolution.
That's it. That's the
And you
key
should
element.
be able to track your history as well, like a progression into, like if you're doing burners now, you can trace back how you got to get to that stage.
Yeah.
But like nowadays, it just seems that people use the excuse of, oh yeah, but when you were doing trains, you had a lot longer in the yards and stuff. But I'm sure you and I both know that you can do like a really funky bubble letter in like 5-10 minutes.
Exactly.
So
Or straight letter.
I just don't get that excuse. Do you know what I mean? And I've had that thrown at me loads of times.
They obviously don't understand or respect. Like it's almost like a tradition, or one of the traditions of graph is style.
Yeah.
It's like one of the elements.
Well, one of the reasons that I wanted to do this sort of section is to try and bring that across through the guests we have, but also like, just trying to talk about how we used to do things.
Yeah.
And so that these young guys can actually understand, because maybe the older guys aren't passing it on. I don't know. There's got to be some reasons, but
It's kind of like when you're working towards something, like any career, you've got to start at the bottom and you've got to work your way up.
Totally.
And then once you get there, it means so much more, and you're that much better as a person, as an artist, whatever. If you're going straight in at the top, it's completely pointless. Yeah. If everyone's really, really good, the whole thing is meaningless.
It's stale, isn't it?
And you've got no individuality. People should understand that it's good to be shit and start off and really work at something and try and be better. It's just good for you as well.
Definitely.
And that is in graph, in the style thing. I just don't get it, how bad it is.
Yeah.
It's like, you look at the 70s, the beginnings of graph in New York, and the style is better.
We share exactly the same thought.
Than a lot of these new train writers.
Yeah.
Respect for doing the trains.
100%.
But go back to basics.
Yeah, I'd rather see hundreds of bubble letters running around on the system than people trying to do styles they're not ready for yet.
It's just all bodged and out of proportion. Yeah. And it's just like a 3-year-old has done it.
You see, folks, it ain't just me. There's other people that share this view.
And it's like, it's good to be harsh on people, and it's good to criticise people, because that will improve things.
That's how you get better.
Yeah. You can't just let everything just be, whatever, there's no rules and this kind of stuff.
Well, you said it yourself.
It's good to have rules.
It's that progression, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's like
good to progress. It's good to have kings and toys and hierarchies, and it's good to do stuff illegally as well. Yep. All of these things are graph.
It's part of it. It's that coin thing again, that whole kind of,
And very few people can do the whole lot.
Yeah.
It's like, there are amazing wall artists who do amazing wild styles, and then you've got the bombers, and I'm actually more interested in the bombers just as a subculture.
Their drive kind of thing.
But if they could pull off some killer styles as well, that would be amazing.
I mean, we talked about style, but the other thing that follows on from that is hand style. When you were writing, I remember the hand styles were amazing alone, let alone the pieces.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Just the style of that tag was...
I know. People like Crash 151,
Yep.
he'd have these amazing hand styles, and Artful Dodger and all those South London bus guys.
Yep.
They'd have these amazing hand styles. Prime, Hang 71.
Yeah. But I just don't see that now, like
Flyboy. There was a guy called Flyboy.
Yeah.
Like just the hand styles were beautiful.
Totally. But that aspect alone, and that's the rawest aspect of graph, the tag.
There are no new writers being able to do that.
I don't know about yourself, but I mean, I used to spend hours just trying to perfect my tag before I'd even put it outside in the open world. Bits of paper, just trying to get that style locked in before I took it out.
Yeah. So because I don't really follow much of the new things going on, but it is a shame if it's just completely lost that style element.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And on that note, I think we need to wrap things up. So I hope you've all enjoyed this. And like I say, this is a very respected man on the scene. He's involved in social media in various different ways, shapes and forms. So be sure to check him out. You can reach his Facebook, Soundcloud, Instagram. And, if you go to any of those to look up Coma, you'll find the information you need on the link when this video goes live. So check it out. Be sure to subscribe to the channel, 521. And make sure you click on the bell to get all those notifications. And who knows, it could be you as one of our future guests. So any final words, Coma?
Thanks for the chat. It was really
Welcome.
interesting, and it's really good to hear different opinions on what's happening.
Thank you for coming, man.
And any music stuff, just search Richard Sen and you'll find it. Music on SoundCloud.
Brilliant. There you have it.
Cheers.